Nature is full of lives so strange they sound impossible, yet every one of them is real. Welcome back to Animal Uncovered. There are moments in biology when you encounter an animal so profoundly strange, so seemingly incompatible with the rules that govern life as we understand it, that you're forced to reconsider what's possible. The naked mole rat is one of those animals. Imagine, if you will, a mammal with no fur, a mammal that can barely see, a mammal that lives its entire existence in pitch-black tunnels beneath the scorching deserts of East Africa, breathing air so stale it would render you unconscious within minutes. A mammal that feels almost no pain, that resists cancer with an efficiency we can barely comprehend, that lives 30 times longer than mice of similar size, and that ages so slowly scientists struggle to detect it happening at all. And yet these peculiarities are merely the surface, because the naked mole rat has abandoned something far more fundamental than fur or sight. It has abandoned the very social structure that defines nearly all mammals. It has become something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist among warm-blooded creatures, something that forces us to ask, at what point does adaptation become reinvention? This is the story of that reinvention, the story of a life cycle so extraordinary, so utterly divorced from mammalian norms that it reads less like natural history and more like science fiction. But it is real, and it is happening right now, in the darkness beneath our feet. Part 1. Our story begins in absolute darkness, deep beneath the hardpan soils of Kenya, Somalia, or Ethiopia, in tunnels that twist and descend through earth, baked hard as concrete by the equatorial sun. A birth is taking place. Not the solitary maternal affair familiar to most mammals, but something closer to what you might witness in a termite mound or an ant colony. The chamber is small, perhaps the size of a basketball, its walls worn smooth by countless bodies passing through. The air is thick, humid, laden with carbon dioxide at concentrations that would be toxic to you or me. The temperature hovers around 30 degrees Celsius, maintained not by the bodies within but by the stable earth itself. And in the centre of this chamber lies the largest individual in the entire colony, the queen. She's enormous compared to her subjects, her body stretched and elongated from years of successive pregnancies. Her spine has lengthened, her vertebrae separated, allowing her to carry litter after litter in a kind of perpetual reproductive state that would be physiologically impossible for most mammals. And now she is giving birth. The pups emerge tiny, pink, wrinkled, each weighing barely 2 grams. They are helpless in the way all mammalian newborns are helpless, but they are not alone. Within moments, workers swarm around them. Not their father, you understand. Not aunts or sisters in the way we typically conceive of family. No, these are individuals who will never reproduce, who exist in a state of permanent biological servitude to the queen and her offspring. The workers clean the pups, consume the afterbirth, and begin the delicate work of transporting these fragile scraps of life to the communal nursery. The queen, already recovering, will be pregnant again within days. She may give birth 5 times in a single year, producing as many as 30 pups per litter. In her lifetime, which may span 3 decades or more, she could give birth to over 900 offspring. But here's what's remarkable. Those 900 pups are not destined to become 900 breeding adults. The vast majority will never reproduce at all. They're born into a caste system as rigid and unforgiving as anything found in the insect world. This is eusociality, the same evolutionary strategy employed by ants, bees, termites, and only 2 known mammals, the naked mole rat and its close relative, the Damaraland mole rat. It is a strategy that requires individuals to surrender their own reproductive potential for the good of the colony, and it begins at birth. Part 2. In those first days of life, the pups are entirely dependent. They cannot see. Their eyes are vestigial, reduced to tiny structures beneath translucent skin, capable of detecting light but forming no images. They cannot regulate their own body temperature. Unlike other mammals, naked mole rats are functionally poikilothermic, meaning their internal temperature rises and falls with their environment. In the stable warmth of the underground nursery, this is no disadvantage. The pups huddle together in writhing masses, their paper-thin skin pressed against one another. They begin to nurse, but not exclusively from the queen. In naked mole rat colonies, lactation is sometimes shared among multiple females, though the queen produces the majority of the milk. The pups grow quickly, doubling their weight within days. Within 2 weeks, their eyes open slightly, though they will never rely on vision. Within 3 weeks, they begin to nibble at the colony's primary food source, tubers. The tunnels of a naked mole rat colony form an extraordinary subterranean network, stretching sometimes 3 kilometers in total length. These tunnels are not random. They are engineered with purpose, extending outward from the central nest in search of underground tubers, the massive storage routes of certain arid zone plants that can weigh several kilograms each. A single tuber might sustain a colony for months, and the naked mole rats consume them from the inside out, hollowing them like miners excavating ore, leaving the outer skin intact so the plant continues to grow. Finding these tubers is a matter of probability and persistence. Workers dig constantly, extending tunnels in all directions, pushing through soil so dense it requires coordinated effort. They work in chains, like bucket brigades. The lead digger gnaws at the earth with its protruding incisors, scooping dirt backward with its feet. Behind it, a second individual sweeps the dirt further back, and so on, until the soil reaches a designated tunnel opening and is kicked to the surface, forming the characteristic volcano-shaped mounds that mark naked mole rat territory from above. This is exhausting work. The diggers must excavate soil harder than many types of stone, in conditions where oxygen is scarce and carbon dioxide accumulates to dangerous levels. And yet they persist, hour after hour, driven by a biological imperative that has no parallel among mammals. As the pups mature, they begin to participate in this labour. By 6 weeks of age, they are no longer infants but workers, integrated into the colony's endless routines. They carry food, they clean tunnels, they huddle with other workers to conserve heat when ambient temperatures drop. And here is where the caste system reveals itself. Not all workers are equal. Some remain small, weighing perhaps 30 grams as adults. These are the frequent workers, the individuals who spend their lives digging, foraging, maintaining the nest. Others grow larger, reaching 50 grams or more. These are the infrequent workers, individuals who dig less often and may serve more specialized roles. And then there are the soldiers, still larger, sometimes exceeding 80 grams, with more muscular jaws and a behavioral disposition toward aggression. When a tunnel is breached by a predator, a snake perhaps, or a rival colony, it is the soldiers who respond, forming living barricades with their bodies, biting and thrashing with startling ferocity. But all of these individuals, regardless of size or role, share one defining characteristic. They do not breed. Their reproductive organs remain undeveloped, suppressed by a combination of behavioral and hormonal signals emanating from the queen herself. Part 3. The mechanism of this suppression is elegant and ruthless. The queen maintains her dominance through a combination of aggression and pheromones. She patrols the tunnels regularly, shoving smaller workers aside, asserting her physical superiority. This constant bullying serves a biological function. It elevates stress hormones in subordinate females, suppressing their estrous cycles and preventing ovulation. But it's not merely behavioral. Chemical signals in the queen's urine and feces also play a role, broadcasting her reproductive status to the entire colony. Workers regularly consume these excretions, a behavior called coprophagy, which may serve both nutritional and regulatory functions. By ingesting the queen's waste, they ingest the hormonal messages that reinforce the social hierarchy. For males, the suppression is less hormonal and more simply a matter of access. The queen mates with only 1 to 3 males at a time, her chosen consorts. These breeding males are typically larger individuals who have somehow distinguished themselves, though the criteria remain poorly understood. The non-breeding males retain functional reproductive organs and produce sperm, but they are effectively excluded from mating opportunities by the breeding males and the queen herself. This system produces colonies of extraordinary genetic relatedness, because only the queen reproduces, and because she mates with a limited number of males over her lifetime, all colony members are close relatives, often sharing more than 75% of their genes. This relatedness is key to understanding why eusociality evolved here at all. The evolutionary biologist William Hamilton proposed that individuals might sacrifice their own reproduction if doing so increases the reproductive success of close relatives who share their genes. This is called kin selection, and it explains the logic of worker ants sacrificing themselves to defend the hive. In naked mole rats, the same logic applies. A non-breeding female shares so many genes with the queen's offspring that raising her siblings is, in a genetic sense, nearly as effective as raising her own young. But there's a critical environmental piece to this puzzle. The underground tubers that naked mole rats depend on are scattered and unpredictable. Finding them requires enormous effort. Defending them, once found, requires large group. A solitary naked mole rat would likely starve before locating sufficient food. But a colony of 80 individuals working cooperatively can excavate vast tunnel networks and exploit resources too large for any single animal to defend. In this harsh, food-scarce environment, cooperation isn't merely advantageous, it's essential. And eusociality, with its rigid division of labour and reproductive suppression, is cooperation taken to its logical extreme. Part 4. Life in the colony follows rhythms dictated not by day and night, which have no meaning in perpetual darkness, but by the availability of food, the need for tunnel maintenance, and the cycles of the queen's reproduction. Workers rest in communal chambers, piled atop one another in squirming heaps. Their lack of fur, which seems so maladaptive on the surface, is actually an advantage here. Without fur, they can press skin to skin, maximizing heat transfer and allowing the group to thermoregulate collectively. When the tunnels grow cold, they huddle tighter. When temperatures rise, they spread out or retreat to deeper, cooler chambers. Communication occurs through a rich vocabulary of vocalizations. Naked mole rats are among the most vocal of rodents, producing at least 17 distinct calls. Soft chirps signal contentment, sharp alarm calls warn of danger, and there are recruitment calls used by diggers to summon help when they strike hard soil or when a tunnel needs reinforcement. These vocalizations carry well through the tunnels, allowing coordination across distances. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of colony life is what naked mole rats can endure. The air in their deepest tunnels contains oxygen levels as low as 7% compared to the 21% we breathe. Carbon dioxide concentrations can exceed 10%, levels that would cause unconsciousness in humans within minutes, and yet naked mole rats navigate these conditions effortlessly. They do so through a series of astonishing physiological adaptations. Their hemoglobin has an unusually high affinity for oxygen, extracting every available molecule from the thin air. Their metabolic rate is remarkably low for a mammal, reducing their oxygen requirements, and most remarkably, when oxygen becomes truly scarce, their cells can switch to a metabolic pathway more commonly associated with plants. They begin metabolizing fructose directly, bypassing the oxygen-dependent processes that power most animal cells. In effect, they can survive brief periods of near-total oxygen deprivation by temporarily abandoning conventional mammalian metabolism altogether. This is not an adaptation you see in other rodents. This is biology rewriting its own rules. And then there's pain, or rather, the absence of it. Naked mole rats lack a neurotransmitter called substance P in their sensory neurons, a chemical crucial for transmitting certain types of pain signals. As a result, they are insensitive to acid and capsaicin, the compound that makes chili peppers burn. In experiments, naked mole rats will walk across surfaces coated with acids that cause mice to writhe and withdraw. They simply don't register the pain. Why? Because the soils they dig through are rich in carbon dioxide, which dissolves in moisture to form carbonic acid. Their tunnels are acidic environments. Feeling pain every time they touch the soil would be maladaptive. So evolution removed the sensation entirely. These aren't curiosities, these are solutions, elegant and precise, to the specific problems posed by subterranean life. Part 5. As workers grow older, their roles may shift. Some individuals transition from frequent workers to infrequent workers, spending less time digging and more time guarding or maintaining the nest. Others, particularly females, may experience a kind of latent readiness, their reproductive systems remaining suppressed but not atrophied, waiting. Because here's the thing about naked mole rat queens. They are not immortal, and when a queen dies, or when her dominance wanes, the colony faces a crisis. The death of a queen triggers chaos. Within hours, larger females begin to fight, sometimes violently, for dominance. These battles can last days or even weeks, with individuals shoving, biting, and wrestling in the tunnels. Gradually, a new queen emerges, often one of the heaviest and most aggressive females. Her body begins to change, her vertebrae separate, her spine elongates, preparing her for the reproductive marathon ahead. The transition is not always smooth. Sometimes colonies split, with rival females establishing separate nests. Sometimes the colony collapses entirely, unable to reorganize without a clear leader. But when succession succeeds, the new queen mates, becomes pregnant, and the cycle begins anew. What's fascinating is that this transition reveals something profound. The workers are not sterile in the way insect workers are sterile. They are reproductively suppressed, held in a state of suspended potential. Given the right circumstances, a worker can become a queen. The biology is reversible. This plasticity suggests that naked mole rat eusociality is relatively recent in evolutionary terms, perhaps emerging within the last few million years. In older eusocial lineages like ants, workers have evolved physiological sterility, their reproductive organs vestigial. In naked mole rats, the hardware remains intact. It's the software, the social and hormonal controls, that prevents reproduction. And yet, for most individuals, that potential is never realized. They live their entire lives as workers, laboring in darkness, never mating, never producing offspring of their own. How long do they live? This is where things become truly extraordinary. Part 6. Most rodents are short-lived. Mice typically survive 2 to 3 years, rats perhaps 4. The general rule in biology is that small mammals burn fast and bright, their high metabolic rates accelerating both life and death. Naked mole rats violate this rule completely. They live on average more than 30 years. The oldest recorded individual reached 37 years in captivity, and there's no reason to believe this is their upper limit. They live longer than dogs, longer than cats, longer than many animals 10 times their size, and they do so while showing almost no signs of aging. In most mammals, aging is characterized by a predictable decline. Muscle mass decreases, bone density drops, cardiovascular function deteriorates, cancer rates increase exponentially with age. Mortality follows what's called a Gompertz curve. The probability of death doubles approximately every 8 years in humans, creating an exponential rise in mortality with age. Naked mole rats don't follow this pattern. Their mortality rate remains essentially flat from sexual maturity to death. A 10-year-old naked mole rat has roughly the same probability of dying as a 30-year-old naked mole rat. They are still finding their first grey hairs, so to speak, when most rodents would have been dead for decades. This is called negligible senescence, and it's vanishingly rare among mammals. Only a handful of species exhibit it, and none as dramatically as the naked mole rat. Why don't they age? The answers are still emerging, but several mechanisms appear to be at work. Their cells maintain high levels of proteasomes, molecular machines that degrade damaged proteins, preventing the accumulation of cellular junk that characterizes aging in other animals. Their mitochondria, the powerhouse of cells, remain unusually efficient across their lifespan, and their bodies produce enormous quantities of high molecular weight hyaluronan, a sugary substance that fills the spaces between cells. This last compound is particularly intriguing. In most mammals, hyaluronan is relatively small. In naked mole rats, it forms massive chains, creating a viscous extracellular matrix. This may prevent cells from crowding together, reducing the signals that trigger uncontrolled division, which is to say, cancer. And cancer is where the naked mole rat truly defies expectations. For decades, researchers reported that naked mole rats simply didn't get cancer. Not rarely, never, in thousands of necropsies, across hundreds of captive individuals living their full natural lifespan, not a single spontaneous tumour was found. This claim has been slightly revised in recent years. A few cases of cancer have now been documented in very old individuals, but the rate remains astonishingly low, perhaps 1,000 times lower than in mice. For a mammal living 30 years, this is nothing short of miraculous. The mechanisms are multi-layered. The high molecular weight hyaluronan plays a role, as does a gene called P16, which naked mole rats express at unusually high levels. This gene acts as a brake on cell division, shutting down cells that attempt to replicate too aggressively. Naked mole rats essentially have 2 independent tumour suppression systems, either of which alone would be sufficient to prevent most cancers. Together, they create redundancy, a biological failsafe that has captured the attention of cancer researchers worldwide. Because if we could understand how naked mole rats suppress cancer so effectively, if we could translate even a fraction of that mechanism into medicine, the implications would be transformative. Part 7. Let's return to the colony, to the tunnels, to the lives playing out in darkness. Because the naked mole rat's extraordinary biology exists not in a laboratory, but in the wild, in ecosystems shaped by aridity and scarcity. The semi-arid regions of East Africa where naked mole rats live are harsh. Rainfall is sparse and unpredictable. Surface temperatures fluctuate wildly. For most of the year, the soil is too hard to dig. But when the rains come, briefly softening the earth, naked mole rats emerge in a frenzy of activity. Tunnels are extended, new foraging routes established, volcano mounds appearing across the landscape like overnight eruptions. These mounds, modest as they seem, play a role in the broader ecosystem. They turn over soil, aerating it, mixing nutrients. Plants may colonize the fresh earth. Insects and other invertebrates exploit the disturbed ground. Naked mole rats, in their relentless excavation, become ecosystem engineers, shaping the underground world and influencing the surface above. They are prey, too. Snakes, particularly rufous-beaked snakes, specialize in hunting them, slithering into tunnels to ambush workers. This is where the soldiers earn their keep, blocking passages with their bodies, biting at the intruder, sometimes dying in the defense of the colony. It's a sacrifice, but again, a genetically rational one. The soldier shares so many genes with its siblings that its death, if it protects the queen and her offspring, is evolutionarily sound. Above ground, predators wait at the mounds. Birds of prey, jackals and monitor lizards snatch workers who venture too close to the surface during digging operations. But most naked mole rats live their entire lives without ever seeing the sky. They're born underground, labour underground, and die underground, their world bounded by earth and darkness. And yet in that constrained existence they have achieved something remarkable. They have built a society. Part 8. Eusociality is rare because it's costly. It requires individuals to surrender the fundamental biological imperative to reproduce. Among insects, this sacrifice is softened by haplodiploidy, a genetic system that makes sisters more related to each other than they would be to their own offspring, tipping the evolutionary math in favour of helping over breeding. Naked mole rats don't have haplodiploidy. They're diploid, like us. So why did eusociality evolve here? The answer seems to lie in the intersection of ecology and relatedness. The underground tubers are rare and valuable, worth defending cooperatively. The soil is so hard that solitary digging would be nearly impossible. And because naked mole rat colonies are founded by a single breeding pair, and because dispersal is difficult in such harsh environments, colonies tend to remain genetically isolated, inbreeding over generations. This inbreeding increases relatedness, making kin selection more powerful. Essentially, naked mole rats were trapped by hard soil, trapped by scarce food, trapped by a landscape that made solitary life untenable. And in that trap they found a solution so extreme, so unlike anything else in the mammalian world, that it borders on alien. But it works. Naked mole rat colonies thrive in places where other rodents cannot. They endure droughts that last years. They survive in soils where oxygen is scarce and food is scattered. They have turned limitation into opportunity, constraint into innovation. And we, watching from above, have only recently begun to understand what they've achieved. Part 9. Somewhere beneath the hardpan soils of East Africa, right now a colony is at work. Workers are digging, extending tunnels into the unknown, searching for the next tuber. Soldiers are patrolling, alert for threats. The queen is resting, her body already swelling with the next litter. Pups are being born. Elders, if we can call them that, are going about tasks they've performed for decades, their bodies unchanged, their mortality deferred by mechanisms we're only beginning to understand. And all of this is happening in total darkness, in air we couldn't breathe, in a social structure we can barely comprehend, among animals that feel almost no pain, rarely develop cancer, and live longer than any rodent has a right to live. They are, in every sense, extraordinary. Not because they are beautiful or charismatic or easy to love, but because they exist at all. Because they represent a solution to the problem of survival so radical, so complete, that it forces us to expand our definition of what's possible. The naked mole rat is not wrong. It is not a failed experiment or a biological mistake. It is instead a reminder that life finds a way, even in the most unlikely places, even through the most unlikely means. And that perhaps is the deepest lesson these strange, hairless, nearly blind creatures have to teach us. That nature is endlessly inventive, that the rules we think govern life are more like guidelines, bendable and breakable in the hands of evolution, and that somewhere, in the dark beneath our feet, the impossible is happening every day. The natural world never stops surprising us. This has been Animal Uncovered. Comment which insane life cycle you want to hear next.